The people who laugh at you today are often the same people who beg for your forgiveness tomorrow. The grand ballroom of the Sterling Crown Hotel had never been so quiet. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen stars, casting golden reflections across marble floors polished so perfectly they looked like mirrors. Hundreds of guests stood motionless, their expensive suits and designer gowns suddenly feeling less important than the scene unfolding before them. Near the center of the room, Victoria Brooks gripped the edge of a table so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. Her confident smile had disappeared. The woman who spent years reminding everyone about status, reputation, and social standing now looked completely lost. Around her, whispers spread through the crowd. Some people exchanged nervous glances. Others simply stared. On the stage stood Vanessa Carter. Calm, elegant, unshaken. The same woman Victoria had mocked less than 48 hours earlier. The same woman she had mistaken for a hotel cleaner. Vanessa's expression revealed nothing. She wasn't angry. She wasn't smiling. Somehow that made the moment even more uncomfortable. A row of executives stood behind her, all waiting silently. The chairman of one of the largest investment groups in America had just finished speaking, and his final words still echoed through the ballroom. Please join me in welcoming the future leader of Carter Global Holdings, Ms. Vanessa Carter. The silence that followed felt endless. Victoria's daughter Olivia looked as though she had forgotten how to breathe. Several guests lowered their eyes, suddenly remembering every rude comment they had laughed at, every insult they had ignored, every moment they had watched Vanessa being treated as if she didn't belong. Near the back of the ballroom, Ethan Brooks stood frozen. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't shocked because Vanessa was wealthy. He was shocked because she had never once mentioned it. Not when people looked down on her. Not when she was embarrassed in public. Not even when she had every opportunity to reveal the truth and stop the humiliation. His eyes remained fixed on her as pieces of the puzzle finally came together. The confidence, the composure, the intelligence. It all made sense now. Vanessa stepped toward the microphone. The room grew even quieter. Funny thing about first impressions, she said softly. Her voice wasn't loud, yet everyone heard every word. They reveal far more about the person making the judgment than the person being judged. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Victoria lowered her head. For the first time in years, she had no response. No clever remark. No excuse. No way to undo what had happened. And yet the most surprising part wasn't the silence. It was that Vanessa wasn't there for revenge. She wasn't there to embarrass anyone. She wasn't there to settle scores. She was there because she had accomplished exactly what she set out to do. 2 days earlier, she had wanted to expose the truth about a family she had never met. Now she had. The room remained frozen as Vanessa looked across the crowd one final time. Then the story of how everything began returned to her mind. 48 hours earlier, sitting inside a private penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Vanessa Carter had been preparing to ruin another blind date. 48 hours earlier, rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vanessa Carter's Manhattan penthouse as she stood barefoot with a coffee mug in her hand, staring at the skyline below. At 29 years old, she was the future face of Carter Global Holdings, a company worth billions of dollars with investments stretching across real estate, technology, hospitality, and finance. Yet none of that was what occupied her mind that morning. The problem standing in front of her was far more annoying than any business deal. Her grandfather, William Carter, sat comfortably in a leather chair across the room, watching her with the patience of a man who had spent decades negotiating impossible situations. This is the 11th blind date in 14 months, Vanessa said without turning around. Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? William smiled. It sounds like a granddaughter who keeps finding reasons to avoid meeting decent men. Vanessa laughed. Decent men do not ask about family assets within the first 10 minutes. Not all of them do. Most of them do. William folded his hands. Then perhaps you have been meeting the wrong people. Vanessa finally turned toward him. Or perhaps people behave differently when they know they are sitting across from a billionaire. The old man studied her face carefully. He knew she was not being dramatic. Ever since her name began appearing in business magazines, introductions had become exhausting. Some people wanted access. Some wanted influence. Others simply wanted the status that came with being connected to the Carter family. Very few seemed interested in Vanessa herself. This one is different, William said. Vanessa immediately rolled her eyes. You say that every time. This family has an excellent reputation. So did the last family. Ethan Brooks built his own career. Wonderful. Vanessa. Grandpa. William sighed before leaning forward. Then prove yourself right. She narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? A small smile appeared on his face. You always claim people reveal their true character when they think nobody important is watching. Fine. Go test your theory. Vanessa placed her coffee mug down. You are serious. Completely serious. For a moment, neither spoke. Then an idea slowly formed in Vanessa's mind. It was reckless, childish, completely unnecessary, which was exactly why she liked it. A grin spread across her face. William immediately recognized that look. What are you thinking? Nothing dangerous. That answer never reassures me. Vanessa walked toward the massive closet near the hallway. You want me to meet them? She asked. I will meet them. Vanessa. And I will discover exactly who they are before they discover who I am. William stood up. What are you planning? Vanessa opened the closet and began searching through a section rarely used. Hidden behind designer coats and tailored dresses was something she had not touched in years. A simple housekeeping uniform left over from an old charity event. She held it up and smiled. William stared at the outfit, then at his granddaughter. Absolutely not. Vanessa laughed. Oh, I think absolutely yes. And at that exact moment, neither of them realized that what was supposed to be a harmless test was about to change far more than a single blind date. The following afternoon, Vanessa stepped off a city bus 3 blocks away from the Sterling Crown Hotel. Nobody who passed her on the sidewalk gave her a second look. That was exactly the point. Her dark housekeeping uniform was plain and slightly oversized. Her hair was pulled back neatly beneath a simple cap. The designer handbag she normally carried had been replaced with a worn canvas tote she had purchased that morning. Even her jewelry was gone. No diamonds. No luxury watch. No signs of wealth. As she approached the hotel entrance, she felt a strange sense of freedom. For once, nobody recognized the Carter name. Nobody cared who she was. Nobody was trying to impress her. A valet standing near the entrance glanced at her uniform and immediately pointed toward a side employee entrance without saying a word. Vanessa almost laughed. She had not even spoken, yet he had already decided where she belonged. She continued toward the main entrance anyway. The moment she stepped through the revolving doors, she was greeted by soaring ceilings, polished marble floors, and the familiar scent of expensive flowers. The hotel happened to be one of several luxury properties Carter Global was considering for a future acquisition. Vanessa knew the building well. What interested her now was something entirely different. She wanted to see people. The real people behind polished reputations and carefully managed public images. A hostess standing near the restaurant entrance looked up from her tablet. Her smile appeared automatically, then vanished the instant her eyes landed on Vanessa's uniform. Can I help you? The hostess asked. The words sounded polite. The tone did not. I am meeting someone, Vanessa replied. The woman frowned. Meeting someone? Yes. In the restaurant. Vanessa nodded. The hostess looked her up and down again. There must be some mistake. Vanessa smiled politely. I do not think so. The hostess hesitated before checking her screen. A few seconds later, confusion crossed her face. The reservation existed. The name was there. Yet the woman standing in front of her did not fit the image she expected. Please wait here, she finally said. Vanessa stepped aside. Nearby guests occasionally glanced in her direction before quickly looking away. Most seemed to assume she worked there. One businessman nearly handed her an empty coffee cup before realizing she was not a hotel employee. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. 2 women stepped into the lobby. Vanessa recognized them immediately from photographs she had seen online. Victoria Brooks and her daughter Olivia. Both were dressed impeccably. Both carried themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to receiving attention whenever they entered a room. Olivia spotted Vanessa first. Her eyes landed on the housekeeping uniform. Then she turned toward her mother and whispered something that made both women smile. Vanessa noticed it instantly. The test had officially begun. Victoria walked directly toward her without the slightest sign of recognition. Excuse me, she said, extending a shopping bag. Take this upstairs to the private dining room for us. Vanessa looked at the bag, then at Victoria, then back at the bag. For a brief moment, neither woman spoke. And in that silence, Vanessa learned more about Victoria Brooks than any background report could ever reveal. Vanessa looked at the shopping bag for a moment before accepting it with a calm smile. Of course, she said. Victoria barely acknowledged her response. She had already turned away. Olivia glanced at Vanessa one last time and smirked. Make sure nothing inside gets damaged. Some of those items cost more than a year's salary for people like you. Vanessa almost laughed. Instead, she simply nodded. I will be careful. The two women walked toward the private dining room without another word. Vanessa followed several steps behind, carrying the bag they assumed she was obligated to deliver. As they entered the restaurant's exclusive upper section, she immediately noticed how staff members reacted. Managers greeted Victoria warmly. Servers rushed to accommodate every request. Several guests recognized the Brooks family and waved enthusiastically. Reputation clearly mattered here. Vanessa quietly placed the shopping bag beside Victoria's chair. There you go, she said. Victoria glanced at the bag and then reached into her purse. For a second, Vanessa thought she might finally realize something was unusual. Instead, Victoria pulled out a $5 bill and extended it toward her. For your trouble. Vanessa stared at the bill. $5. Not because help had been requested. Not because a service had been provided. Simply because Victoria assumed the woman standing in front of her needed it. Olivia chuckled softly. Take it. You probably do not get many opportunities like this. Several people seated nearby overheard the comment and smiled politely. Nobody corrected her. Nobody seemed uncomfortable. Vanessa accepted the bill. Not because she wanted it, but because every second revealed more about the people around her. Thank you, she replied. Olivia leaned back in her chair. You are welcome. Then she turned toward her mother. See? Some people appreciate generosity. Vanessa walked away and found a quiet spot near the entrance where she could observe. Less than 10 minutes passed before Victoria waved her over again. Excuse me. Vanessa approached. Yes. Victoria pointed toward an empty water glass. Can you find someone to refill this? Vanessa glanced at the nearby server, standing less than 10 feet away. There is a waiter right there. Victoria's expression hardened instantly. Then why are you still standing here? Olivia laughed. Honestly, some people have no initiative. Vanessa remained perfectly calm. I will let him know. As she stepped away, she noticed several guests studying her. Most had reached the same conclusion as Victoria. Uniform equals employee. Employee equals invisible. The pattern was fascinating. Nobody asked her name. Nobody wondered why she was there. Nobody questioned the assumptions being made. Then the restaurant entrance opened again. A tall man entered wearing a navy blazer and carrying himself with quiet confidence. Conversations softened as he crossed the room. Vanessa immediately recognized him from the photograph her grandfather had shown her. Ethan Brooks had arrived. Unlike the others, he did not head straight for the table. His eyes briefly scanned the room before landing on Vanessa. For a moment, he seemed confused. Then he noticed the housekeeping uniform and smiled politely. It was a simple gesture. Small. Almost insignificant. Yet after everything she had witnessed during the past 30 minutes, it stood out immediately. Because he was the first person in that room who looked at her as though she were an actual human being rather than part of the furniture. And what happened next surprised Vanessa even more. Vanessa watched Ethan approach the table while Victoria immediately stood to greet him. Olivia's expression brightened as though the most important person in the room had finally arrived. Ethan hugged his mother politely before shaking hands with several guests. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of sitting down immediately, he turned toward Vanessa. Excuse me, he said. Thank you for helping my family. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. You are welcome. Ethan smiled. I know how chaotic these gatherings can get. It was such a normal conversation that Vanessa almost forgot she was supposed to be invisible. Before she could respond, Olivia laughed from her seat. Ethan, you do not have to thank the staff for doing their jobs. The comment drew a few chuckles from nearby guests. Ethan looked toward his sister. Being polite does not cost anything. Olivia shrugged. Maybe not, but some people might get the wrong idea. Vanessa noticed the slight tension that crossed Ethan's face. He clearly did not agree, but he chose not to argue. Instead, he turned back toward her. I hope nobody has been giving you a hard time. Before Vanessa could answer, Victoria spoke up. Oh, do not encourage her. She has been standing around all afternoon. Vanessa almost admired the confidence with which people invented facts. Ethan glanced at her. Have you? Vanessa smiled calmly. I have mostly been observing. Olivia laughed again. That sounds about right. Several guests joined in. One woman seated near the window leaned toward her husband and whispered loudly enough for others to hear. People always have time to observe when they are not responsible for anything important. More laughter followed. Vanessa remained completely still. Every comment felt like another piece of evidence. Nobody knew her. Nobody knew her story. Yet they felt comfortable making assumptions simply because of a uniform. Ethan seemed increasingly uncomfortable. I think everyone deserves respect, he said quietly. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. Of course they do. But there are levels in life, Ethan. That is just reality. Olivia nodded immediately. Exactly. Some people lead. Some people follow. Vanessa noticed several heads around the table agreeing. The conversation continued, and with every passing minute the comments became less subtle. One guest talked about how ambition separated successful people from everyone else. Another joked that certain people were born to serve while others were born to build companies. Nobody mentioned Vanessa directly anymore. They did not need to. The implication hung in the air. Ethan remained silent for a while before finally looking at Vanessa again. What is your name? The table grew noticeably quieter. Vanessa answered without hesitation. Vanessa. Ethan smiled. Nice to meet you, Vanessa. Olivia nearly choked on her drink. You are introducing yourself to a cleaner? Ethan looked at her. I am introducing myself to a person. For the first time all afternoon, nobody laughed. And as Vanessa studied Ethan's face, she realized something she had not expected when this experiment began. One member of the Brooks family was not behaving according to the script everyone else seemed determined to follow. Vanessa should have felt satisfied. The entire purpose of her plan had been to uncover people's true character, and the Brooks family was revealing plenty. Yet as she stood near the entrance of the private dining room, she found herself thinking less about Victoria and Olivia and more about Ethan. That annoyed her. He was supposed to be part of the test, not the exception to it. The conversation at the table continued while servers moved between guests carrying plates and drinks. Several people shifted their attention back to business, investments, and social connections. Vanessa listened quietly. She learned that Victoria frequently spoke about reputation. She learned that Olivia measured success almost entirely through wealth and appearances. Most importantly, she learned that neither woman seemed interested in understanding people who lived outside their social circle. An hour passed, then another. Eventually, a waiter carrying a tray accidentally brushed against a chair near Olivia. Nothing spilled. Nothing broke. But Olivia immediately sighed dramatically. Can anyone in this hotel do their job properly? The young waiter apologized. I am sorry, ma'am. Olivia shook her head. That is always the answer. Vanessa noticed the waiter could not have been older than 20. His face turned red as nearby guests watched the exchange. Ethan looked uncomfortable. It was an accident, he said. Olivia shrugged. People say that whenever they make mistakes. The waiter quickly walked away. A few minutes later, Vanessa stepped into a hallway outside the dining room. She wanted a moment alone to collect her thoughts. To her surprise, she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan. Vanessa. She turned. Yes. He smiled politely. I hope my family has not made your day difficult. Vanessa almost laughed. That depends on how you define difficult. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Fair point. For a moment, they simply stood there. Then Ethan said something she did not expect. You seem different. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Different from what? Different from how everyone assumes you are. The answer caught her off guard. Ethan continued before she could respond. Most people become nervous when they are surrounded by wealthy strangers. You do not. Vanessa folded her arms. Maybe I am used to observing people. Ethan smiled. There is that word again. She smiled back despite herself. For a brief second the conversation felt effortless. Honest. Then the dining room door suddenly opened. Olivia stepped into the hallway. The moment she saw them talking, her expression changed. Ethan. Her voice carried clear disapproval. Mother has been looking for you. Ethan glanced toward the dining room. I will be there in a minute. Olivia's eyes moved toward Vanessa. You really should not encourage this. The hallway fell silent. Ethan frowned. Encourage what? Olivia laughed softly. You know exactly what I mean. Vanessa saw the assumption immediately. Olivia believed kindness created expectations. She believed conversations should happen only between people she considered equals. Ethan's expression hardened. I was having a conversation. With hotel staff. With a person. Olivia rolled her eyes and returned to the dining room. Ethan remained standing there for a moment before sighing. I am sorry about that. Vanessa watched him carefully. The more she learned about him, the less certain she became about how this experiment would end. And that uncertainty was beginning to make things far more complicated than she had planned. The rest of the afternoon should have been simple. Vanessa only needed to finish her experiment, leave the hotel, and report back to her grandfather that yet another blind date had failed before it even began. Instead, she found herself staying longer than planned. Every time she considered leaving, something happened that pulled her attention back toward Ethan. After returning to the dining room, she noticed he was different from everyone else at the table. While the others talked about status, connections, and social influence, Ethan asked questions about people's ideas. When a guest bragged about purchasing a third vacation home, Ethan seemed far more interested in discussing a community housing project his architecture firm had recently completed. Vanessa listened from a distance, quietly observing. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Victoria frequently interrupted conversations to mention successful friends, exclusive clubs, or wealthy families she knew. Olivia constantly checked social media and seemed obsessed with appearances. Ethan appeared exhausted by both behaviors. As the evening continued, several more guests arrived for a networking reception connected to the dinner. The private dining room became increasingly crowded. At one point, a hotel manager approached Vanessa and politely asked if she could help direct arriving guests toward the ballroom across the hall. Vanessa agreed. She spent nearly 20 minutes greeting visitors and pointing them toward the correct entrance. Most barely acknowledged her. Some did not look at her at all. Then Olivia appeared again. She was carrying a designer handbag and speaking with two women around her age. The moment she noticed Vanessa, her expression changed. There you are, Olivia said. Vanessa turned toward her. Can I help you? Olivia removed a small velvet jewelry case from her purse. Hold this for a minute. Vanessa accepted the case. Before she could say anything, Olivia turned back toward her friends and continued walking. One of the women laughed. You trust strangers with that? Olivia glanced over her shoulder. She works here. Besides, where would she go? The three women disappeared into the ballroom. Vanessa looked down at the case in her hand. The comment was not cruel because of what Olivia said. It was cruel because of what she assumed. Trust was not being offered. Respect was not being offered. The assumption was simply that people in certain uniforms existed beneath notice. 10 minutes later, Olivia returned. Give me that. Vanessa handed over the jewelry case. Olivia opened it briefly, checked inside, and nodded. Good. Vanessa stared at her. Were you expecting something to be missing? Olivia smiled. You can never be too careful. Then she walked away. For the first time all day, Vanessa felt genuine disappointment. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Disappointment. Because people like Olivia never realized how much their words revealed about them. Across the room, Ethan had witnessed the entire exchange. Their eyes met for only a second. Yet Vanessa immediately recognized something in his expression. He had heard every word. And unlike everyone else in the room, he looked deeply troubled by what had just happened. As the reception continued, the atmosphere inside the ballroom grew louder and more crowded. Business leaders, investors, and socialites filled every corner of the room. Vanessa remained near the entrance, quietly observing. The experiment had already revealed more than enough, yet something told her the evening was not finished. A few minutes after Olivia walked away with the jewelry case, a sharp voice suddenly cut through the conversations. My bracelet is gone. The room immediately quieted. Olivia stood near one of the display tables, staring into her open purse. Several guests turned toward her. What happened? Victoria asked as she hurried over. Olivia looked visibly upset. My diamond bracelet. It was right here. She searched her purse again, then her jacket pockets, then the table. It is gone. Guests began exchanging concerned looks. The bracelet was well known among their circle. Expensive, distinctive, difficult to miss. Victoria's expression hardened. When did you last have it? Olivia hesitated. Then her eyes slowly moved across the room until they landed on Vanessa. For a brief second, Vanessa already knew what was coming. I remember now, Olivia said. I handed my jewelry case to her earlier. The room became completely silent. Several heads immediately turned toward Vanessa. One woman covered her mouth. Another guest narrowed his eyes. Victoria followed Olivia's gaze. Are you saying she took it? Olivia shrugged dramatically. I am saying she had access to it. Vanessa remained calm. The bracelet was never inside the jewelry case when you handed it to me. Olivia folded her arms. That is convenient. The whispers started almost instantly. Vanessa listened as assumptions spread through the room faster than facts. Nobody asked questions. Nobody requested evidence. The conclusion had already formed in many minds. Uniform equals employee. Employee plus missing jewelry equals obvious suspect. Ethan stepped forward immediately. Hold on. Olivia looked at him. What? You do not know that she took anything. Victoria nodded toward Vanessa. Then where is the bracelet? Vanessa answered calmly. I do not know. Olivia laughed. Exactly. Several guests appeared satisfied by that response, as though uncertainty itself proved guilt. A hotel security supervisor was called over. The man looked uncomfortable from the moment he arrived. Perhaps there is a misunderstanding, he said carefully. Victoria's voice grew colder. A very expensive bracelet is missing. Olivia pointed toward Vanessa. And she was the last person outside our family who handled my belongings. Ethan looked increasingly frustrated. This is ridiculous. No, Olivia replied. What would be ridiculous is ignoring the obvious. Vanessa stood quietly while everyone debated her character as though she were not standing there. Oddly enough, she felt less hurt than disappointed. The real test was no longer about one family. It was about how quickly an entire room could judge someone they did not know. Then the security supervisor spoke again. There are cameras throughout this ballroom. The room fell silent. If necessary, we can review the footage. For the first time all evening, a flicker of uncertainty appeared in Olivia's eyes. The security supervisor immediately radioed the surveillance office. The ballroom remained silent as dozens of eyes shifted between Olivia and Vanessa. Nobody seemed interested in waiting for facts. Most had already chosen a side. Vanessa noticed it in their expressions. Some looked suspicious. Some looked uncomfortable. Others simply looked eager for confirmation. Ethan stood near her, his jaw tight with frustration. Victoria crossed her arms. This should not take long. The supervisor nodded. We can access the footage within a few minutes. Olivia forced a confident smile. Perfect. 10 uncomfortable minutes later, a hotel manager arrived carrying a tablet connected to the security system. Several guests moved closer. The manager tapped the screen and began playing footage from different camera angles. Everyone watched carefully. First came the moment Olivia handed the jewelry case to Vanessa. Then another angle showed Vanessa standing near the ballroom entrance exactly where she claimed to be. More footage followed. Minute after minute passed. Vanessa never opened the jewelry case. Never left her position. Never handled any bracelet. The room grew quieter with every second. Then the manager paused the video. There. Everyone leaned closer. On the screen, Olivia herself appeared near a cocktail table shortly before announcing the bracelet was missing. As she adjusted her purse, something small slipped from her sleeve and landed beneath the tablecloth without her noticing. The manager enlarged the image. The bracelet, clearly visible. The ballroom became completely silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Olivia's face lost all color. Victoria stared at the screen. That cannot be right. The manager calmly switched to another camera angle. The same event appeared from a different direction. The bracelet had never been stolen. It had fallen accidentally. A hotel employee quickly retrieved the item from beneath the table and handed it to the supervisor. Is this it? He asked. Olivia looked as though she wanted the floor to open beneath her. Yes. Several guests exchanged embarrassed glances. Others suddenly became fascinated by their drinks. The whispers returned, but they sounded very different now. Ethan exhaled slowly. I think everyone owes Vanessa an apology. No one answered. Victoria looked toward Vanessa. For a brief moment, Vanessa thought she might finally admit she had been wrong. Instead, Victoria straightened her posture. It was a misunderstanding. Ethan stared at her. A misunderstanding? Victoria nodded. No harm was done. Vanessa almost laughed at the absurdity of it. No harm. After being publicly accused. After an entire room had quietly assumed the worst about her. After people who knew nothing about her had judged her character without hesitation. Yet somehow, according to Victoria, no harm had been done. Olivia avoided eye contact completely. The bracelet was found, she muttered. That is what matters. Vanessa looked at her calmly. Is it? Olivia finally glanced up. For the first time all evening, she had no clever response. No joke. No sarcastic comment. Nothing. The truth had exposed something far more valuable than a missing bracelet. It had exposed the people who were willing to believe the accusation. And as Vanessa looked around the ballroom, she realized the evening was far from over. Because several people in the room had just revealed exactly who they were. The ballroom slowly returned to life, but something fundamental had changed. Conversations resumed in softer voices. Laughter sounded forced. The confidence many guests had displayed earlier seemed noticeably weaker now that their assumptions had been proven wrong. Vanessa could feel it everywhere she looked. People who had eagerly believed the worst about her were suddenly avoiding eye contact. Others pretended nothing unusual had happened at all. Victoria appeared especially determined to move forward as quickly as possible. "Well," she announced, forcing a smile, "I think we can all agree this evening has been unnecessarily dramatic." A few guests nodded politely. Nobody seemed eager to continue the discussion. Ethan looked at his mother in disbelief. "You still have not apologized." Victoria's smile tightened. "I already said it was a misunderstanding. That is not an apology." Before Victoria could respond, a voice echoed through the ballroom speakers. "Attention, ladies and gentlemen." Every head turned toward the stage at the front of the room. A hotel executive stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for attending tonight's reception. We would like to remind our distinguished guests that the Sterling Crown Acquisition Conference will begin in 45 minutes in the Grand Ballroom." Instantly, the mood shifted. This was the event many investors had traveled across the country to attend. Rumors about the future ownership of the hotel chain had been circulating for months. Several major corporations were reportedly competing for influence in the deal. Guests began discussing potential buyers and market valuations. Victoria seemed relieved by the change of subject. "Now that is something worth talking about," she said. Olivia immediately agreed. "Whoever wins this acquisition is going to control some of the most valuable hospitality properties in the country." Vanessa listened quietly. The irony was becoming difficult to ignore. Around her, people speculated confidently about powerful executives they had never met. Some discussed investment strategies. Others debated corporate leadership. Yet none of them realized they had spent the entire afternoon judging one of the individuals directly connected to the deal. Ethan stepped away from the table and joined Vanessa near the ballroom entrance. "I owe you an apology," he said. Vanessa looked at him. "For what?" "For not speaking up sooner." She studied his face for a moment. "You were one of the few people who did." Ethan shook his head. "Not enough." Before Vanessa could answer, a hotel employee hurried across the room carrying a stack of conference materials. As he passed, one folder slipped from the top and landed near Vanessa's feet. She picked it up automatically. The employee thanked her and rushed away. Vanessa glanced at the cover before returning it. The movement lasted less than 2 seconds. Yet it was long enough for Ethan to notice something unusual. Attached to the folder was a restricted access conference badge reserved for executive leadership participants. For the briefest moment, Ethan saw Vanessa's eyes move toward the badge with immediate recognition, not curiosity. It was the kind of reaction someone had when they already belonged in those rooms. The realization struck him instantly. There was something about Vanessa that did not add up. Something far bigger than a housekeeping uniform. And for the first time all evening, Ethan found himself wondering who she really was. The next 45 minutes passed quickly. Guests gradually left the reception area and moved toward the Grand Ballroom for the acquisition conference. The atmosphere felt entirely different now. Conversations were more serious. Investors reviewed documents. Executives exchanged introductions. Reporters gathered near the stage. Vanessa checked the time on a simple watch hidden beneath her sleeve. Her experiment was almost over. Across the room, Ethan continued watching her whenever he thought she was not paying attention. The more he observed, the less sense the situation made. Nothing about Vanessa matched the role everyone had assigned to her. She carried herself with too much confidence. She spoke with too much composure. Even the way she observed people felt deliberate. As guests entered the ballroom, Ethan finally approached her again. "You are staying for the conference?" Vanessa smiled slightly. "Maybe." Ethan laughed softly. "That is not really an answer. Perhaps I like surprises." Before he could respond, a group of hotel executives suddenly appeared. Near the entrance, their arrival immediately drew attention. Several guests stepped aside. Conversations paused. One executive spoke quietly into a headset, while another checked a schedule. Victoria noticed them too. "That must be the delegation everyone has been waiting for," she said confidently. Olivia nodded. "The lead investors are supposed to arrive any minute." Everyone turned toward the main entrance. Anticipation spread through the room. Rumors had circulated for months about who would ultimately control the future of the Sterling Crown properties. Some believed an international hospitality group would win the deal. Others expected a private equity firm. Nobody seemed completely certain. Then something unexpected happened. One of the senior hotel executives walked directly toward Vanessa. Not past her, not around her, directly toward her. Ethan noticed first. His expression immediately changed. Victoria continued speaking and did not realize what was happening. Neither did Olivia. The executive stopped in front of Vanessa and smiled respectfully. "Good evening, Miss Carter." Ethan froze. Vanessa smiled politely. "Good evening, Richard." The executive nodded. "The board is ready whenever you are." For a moment, nobody nearby moved. Several people who overheard the exchange stared openly. Ethan felt his heart skip. "Miss Carter." The name echoed in his mind. Richard handed Vanessa a black conference credential attached to his silver lanyard. Unlike the standard guest badges, this one carried a gold executive designation. "Your grandfather asked me to remind you that the board meeting begins in 20 minutes, Richard said. "Thank you." Vanessa accepted the credential. Around them, confusion spread rapidly. Olivia blinked several times. Victoria stopped speaking entirely. Neither woman seemed able to process what they had just witnessed. Ethan looked from the credential to Vanessa and back again. Suddenly, dozens of strange details from the afternoon began connecting in his mind. The confidence, the composure, the way she had never reacted when people insulted her. It all made sense now. Yet even then, he still did not understand the full truth. Because the name, Carter, meant something enormous in the business world. And if the woman standing in front of him was the Carter everyone was thinking of, then the entire room was about to discover that they had spent the day judging one of the most powerful heirs in America. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The noise inside the grand ballroom faded into a stunned silence as more people began recognizing the name. Carter. Not just any Carter. The Carter family. The family behind one of the largest investment groups in the country. Victoria's expression slowly shifted from confusion to disbelief. Olivia stared at Vanessa as though she were looking at a completely different person. Ethan remained frozen. He had suspected there was more to her story. He had not imagined anything close to this. Vanessa calmly removed the housekeeping cap and placed it on a nearby table. The simple gesture felt strangely powerful. Nothing about her had changed. She was still the same woman who had stood in front of them all afternoon. Yet suddenly the entire room looked at her differently. That realization alone said everything. Richard gestured toward the main stage. "They are waiting for you." Vanessa nodded. "I will be there shortly." As Richard walked away, several guests immediately began whispering. Names, numbers, corporate rumors, financial headlines. The same people who had ignored her hours earlier were now desperately trying to remember everything they knew about Carter Global Holdings. Olivia finally found her voice. "You are Vanessa Carter." Vanessa looked at her. "Yes." Olivia blinked repeatedly. "The Vanessa Carter?" Vanessa almost smiled. "There is only one that I know of." Victoria stepped forward. "Why would you do this?" The question seemed absurd considering everything that had happened. Vanessa answered calmly. "Do what? Pretend to be someone else." Vanessa glanced around the ballroom. "I never pretended to be anyone else." Neither Victoria nor Olivia had a response. Because it was true. Vanessa had never introduced herself as hotel staff. She had never lied about her identity. She had simply allowed people to make assumptions. Ethan quietly shook his head. The more he thought about the afternoon, the more uncomfortable he felt. Every insult, every accusation, every judgment, none of it had come from Vanessa. It had come from the people around her. A conference announcement echoed through the ballroom speakers. Guests began taking their seats. Reporters moved closer to the stage. Executives arranged documents. The event was about to begin. Victoria suddenly looked nervous. Very nervous. "Vanessa," she said carefully. "Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. It was remarkable how quickly tone could change once status entered the conversation. "Perhaps," Vanessa replied. Olivia forced a smile that looked painfully unnatural. I think there were misunderstandings on all sides. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Even now, they could not simply admit they had been wrong. Then another announcement came from the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the future executive chair of Carter Global Holdings and lead representative for the Sterling Crown Acquisition Group, Ms. Vanessa Carter. The entire ballroom erupted into applause. Reporters lifted cameras. Executives stood. Investors turned toward the aisle. Victoria's face completely drained of color. Olivia looked as though she had forgotten how to breathe. Because in that single moment, they finally understood something far worse than the fact that Vanessa was wealthy. The acquisition group controlling the future of the Sterling Crown properties was Carter Global. And Vanessa was not merely attending the conference. She was leading it. Vanessa walked toward the stage as hundreds of eyes followed her every step. Just hours earlier, many of those same people had looked straight through her. Some had dismissed her. Some had judged her. A few had openly questioned her character. Now they stood and applauded. The contrast was impossible to ignore. As she reached the podium, the room settled into silence. Vanessa thanked the audience and began speaking about the future of the Sterling Crown properties. She discussed long-term growth, employee investment programs, modernization plans, and community partnerships. Her presentation was clear, confident, and precise. Every answer demonstrated exactly why Carter Global had become one of the most respected organizations in the country. When the presentation ended, the applause was even louder than before. Reporters rushed to file stories. Investors gathered near the stage. Executives waited for introductions. Vanessa remained professional throughout it all. She shook hands, answered questions, and thanked attendees for their support. Across the ballroom, Victoria and Olivia sat quietly. The confidence they had displayed all afternoon was completely gone. They watched as industry leaders treated Vanessa with respect and admiration. They watched as powerful executives sought her opinion. Most of all, they watched the consequences of their own behavior unfold in front of them. Eventually, the crowd began to thin. Ethan approached the stage after the final group of investors stepped away. Vanessa smiled when she saw him. "Congratulations," he said sincerely. "Thank you." Ethan shook his head and laughed softly. "I still cannot believe this entire day actually happened." "Neither can I." For a moment, they stood together in comfortable silence. Then Ethan looked at her seriously. "For what it is worth, I am sorry for the way my family treated you." Vanessa studied his face. Unlike the others, there was no calculation behind his words. No attempt to repair a business relationship. No concern about status. Just honesty. "I know," she said. Nearby, Victoria slowly approached. Olivia followed several steps behind. Both women appeared uncomfortable. Victoria cleared her throat. "Vanessa, I owe you an apology." Vanessa listened quietly. "I made assumptions about you that were unfair," Victoria continued. "And I judged you without knowing anything about you." Olivia nodded. "I did the same." For the first time all day, their words sounded genuine. Perhaps because there was no longer any point pretending otherwise. Vanessa smiled politely. "Thank you." Victoria lowered her eyes. "You handled the entire situation with far more grace than I deserved." Vanessa considered that for a moment. Then she said something neither woman expected. "The interesting thing is that nothing about me changed today." Both women looked confused. Vanessa continued. "I was the same person when I walked into the hotel. The only thing that changed was what people believed about me." The truth of those words hung in the air. Nobody argued. Nobody could. A few minutes later, guests began leaving the ballroom. The evening was finally over. As Vanessa prepared to leave, Ethan walked beside her toward the exit. "So," he said with a smile, "if we ever have another conversation, can it happen without a disguise?" Vanessa laughed. "That sounds reasonable." Outside, the lights of Manhattan stretched across the night skyline. Vanessa paused for a moment before stepping into her waiting car. What had started as a simple test had revealed far more than she expected. Some people had failed it completely. One person had not. And as the city lights reflected across the glass towers around her, Vanessa was reminded of a lesson she would never forget. Character is revealed when people believe status does not matter. And true respect is shown long before someone learns your name.